weather is sweltering. 2015 is officially the warmest year on record, but 2016 could be hotter. That is what scientists are telling us. And they're also saying we must act now. How could all these affect us? That is the impact on our health, food security, water supply, and our general well-being. These are some of the areas we will touch on today on the program. Welcome to Earth File. I'm Ayola Kasim. Last year's global average temperature was the hottest ever on record, according to the latest report released by the United Nations World Meteorological Organization. 2015 is the hottest since records began in the 19th century, in a trend that almost all scientists blame on greenhouse gases from burning of fossil fuels, stoking heat waves, droughts, downpours, and rising sea levels.
2015 was the hottest year on record by quite a considerable margin. It was striking. So the average global temperatures, and we're talking about the land surface and the sea surface, that was 0.76 degrees Celsius above the long-term average, which is between 1961 and 1990.
With 14 of the 15 hottest years ever occurring since 2000, many scientists are in little doubt that the record-breaking string of hot years is almost certainly a sign of man-made global warming.
What's important is that this is part of a long-term trend. So 14 of the 15 hottest years on record have all been this century. We've just had, obviously, the hottest year by a big margin. We've had the hottest 5 years, and we've had the hottest 10 years. It's part of a long-term trend. There is no pause in global warming. It is continue, and it is set to continue further.
The temperatures in 2015 were boosted further by the phenomenon called El Niño, which is a band of warm ocean water and wind that can cause increases in temperature across the world and more extreme weather. However, weather experts say El Niño isn't solely responsible for the high temperatures in 2015.
Some of these events were linked to El Niño, but we can, in general terms, say that as a result of climate change, we do expect extreme events like heat waves, like heavy rainfall to increase.
The latest El Niño started in late 2015 and will last until spring of 2016. It is among the strongest ever recorded, but weather experts say the weather phenomenon played just a supporting role in the Earth's temperature rise. Much has been made of the global average temperature for 2015 going from 1 degree Celsius above late 19th century levels.
We're already at 1 degree Celsius, so it really does underline the need for very concerted, very radical, dramatic action to curb global warming and to curb greenhouse gas emissions.
In December 2015, almost 190 nations agreed at a summit in Paris to the strongest deal yet to shift from fossil fuels towards cleaner energies, such as wind and solar power, to limit warming. The United Nations has set a target for these cuts to hold temperature increases to well below the 2 degrees Celsius target. The United Nations report confirms findings by NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which show that in 2015, the average temperature across global land and ocean surfaces was 0.9 degrees Celsius above the 20th century average, surpassing 2014's previous record by 0.16 degrees Celsius. This was the fourth time a global temperature record has been set this century.
This is due to the accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which acts as an insulating blanket around the Earth and traps outgoing long-wave radiation. It's just like putting an extra blanket on your bed at night. It keeps you warmer, and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere keeps the Earth warmer. More carbon dioxide keeps the Earth even warmer.
The 2015 data underscores the urgency of cutting greenhouse gas emissions If the world is to hold temperature increases to well below 2 degrees Celsius, the target agreed to by more than 190 countries at climate talks in Paris last December.
15 of the past 16 years have been the warmest years on record. And when you see a run like this is not something which people can easily dismiss and say it isn't true. 15 out of 16 is a pretty good batting average.
The World Bank projects that 100 million more people could slide into poverty from climate-related shocks. In a new report by the bank, crops yields could fall by 5% and food prices in Africa could increase by 12% by 2030 if no measures are taken to fight climate change and improve safety nets for the poor. It warned that such shocks could wipe out hard-won gains, leading to irreversible losses, driving people back into poverty, particularly in Africa.
Our new report on poverty and climate change shows that in the absence of rapid, inclusive, and climate-smart development, we could have up to 100 million additional people living in poverty by the year 2030. We need urgent and immediate efforts to help poor people and poor countries adapt to this changing climate.
For instance, they said that they want the 2-degree target by the end of the century. And then clearly what came up with the IPCC report, if that is the case, stringent and urgent action are needed. And then if we delay the action, it will be much more difficult for us to reach that degree. And then starting now, that will require by the mid of the century at least 40 to 70% of reduction of the emissions. And then toward the end of the century, zero emission. That means we completely decarbonize our energy systems or negative emissions. And then those are the findings, and then that means the urgency of the action, because the more we wait, the more it will be difficult, and then the cost will be higher.
The report finds that the poorest people are more exposed than the average population to climate-related shocks, such as floods, droughts, and heat waves, and they lose much more of their wealth when they are hit. In the 52 countries where data was available, 85% of the population live in countries where poor people are more exposed to drought than the average. Poor people are also more exposed to higher temperatures and live in countries where food production is expected to decrease because of climate change.
Poor people are very vulnerable to climate shocks, and with climate change, these shocks will become more frequent. So it is urgent to accelerate the implementation of the kind of policies we've been working on, such as heat-resistant crops, better social safety nets to help people who've been affected with natural disasters, and other preventive measures to help people protect themselves against malaria and against other kinds of diseases. But we also have to take action on reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, because that is the only way to avoid runaway climate changes against which we cannot protect anybody, poor or rich.
The World Bank says with climate change, those shocks will become more frequent, so it is urgent to accelerate the implementation of the kind of policies that need to work on the heat-resistant crops, better social safety nets to help poor people who have been affected with natural disasters, and other preventive measures to help poor people protect themselves against malaria and against other kinds of diseases.